SpaceX is preparing for the 9th test flight of its Starship rocket, and this mission could mark a major step forward in the company's goal of full rocket reusability. SpaceX is reusing a super heavy booster, which is a key part of the two-stage Starship system. The booster being used, called Booster 14, was previously launched during Flight 7. On April 3, 2025, it completed a successful static fire test at SpaceX's Starbase facility in Texas. All 33 Raptor engines were ignited during the test, and 29 of them had already been used in previous missions. This test confirmed that the engines and the booster structure are ready to fly again, showing how far SpaceX has come in its effort to reuse its hardware like an aircraft, rather than discarding rockets after each launch. The upper stage of the rocket, known as Ship 35, has also gone through several improvements. It completed 3 rounds of cryogenic proof testing in March 2025 to verify it can handle the extremely cold and pressurized conditions it will face in space. Based on data from earlier missions, Ship 35 features a lighter and redesigned thermal protection system on its side, similar to what was first tested on Ship 31. This version of the heat shield is scaled back, which helps reduce the vehicle's weight while still offering protection during atmospheric re-entry. There are also 2 new openings on its nose cone, which may support updated sensors or systems used during flight. What makes this upcoming flight particularly important is that it builds directly on the lessons SpaceX has learned from Flight 6, 7, and 8. In earlier missions, SpaceX used brand new boosters every time, but now they're testing how much maintenance and refurbishment is needed to fly the same booster again. If Booster 14 performs well, it will prove that the super heavy stage can be reused with minimal turnaround. Ship 35's updated design also represents the latest iteration of Starship's evolution, incorporating real-world test data to improve performance. Flight 9 is expected to follow a flight plan similar to that of Flight 8. Ship 35 will lift off on top of Booster 14 and after separation, attempt to fly a controlled arc and splash down in the Indian Ocean. Meanwhile, the booster will aim to perform a boostback maneuver and return close to the launch site for recovery and analysis. While both stages won't be caught or landed vertically this time, SpaceX's goal is to test new hardware, collect more flight data, and refine its systems step by step. SpaceX has been making headlines for many reasons, but recently, they achieved something truly difficult, and that is developing a completely new rocket engine by making major changes to the previous version. This new engine is not just an upgrade, it's a complete redesign that pushes the limits of rocket technology. In this video, we'll break down everything you need to know about this latest engine and what it means for the future of Starship. Rocket engines are one of the hardest technologies to develop. They operate under extreme temperatures and pressures, handling highly explosive fuels while needing to function perfectly every time. Even the smallest mistake in design or operation can lead to catastrophic failure. Because of this complexity, most space companies don't build their own engines. Instead, they buy pre-made engines from specialized manufacturers. This saves them time, money, and the massive risks involved in developing an engine from scratch. But SpaceX chose a different path. From the very beginning, they decided to develop their own engines rather than rely on external suppliers. Their goal was to build fully reusable rockets that could be launched frequently and affordably. To achieve this, they needed engines that were not only powerful, but also efficient, durable, and capable of being used multiple times with minimal maintenance. This led them to develop the Raptor engine, a revolutionary methane-fueled rocket engine designed for their Starship system. Unlike traditional engines which use simpler combustion cycles, the Raptor engine is based on a full-flow staged combustion cycle. This makes it far more efficient, but also significantly more difficult to engineer and operate. The engine runs under extremely high pressures, and even small design flaws can cause serious failures. SpaceX has spent years improving the Raptor engine, releasing multiple versions. The first, Raptor 1, was developed between 2016 and 2021 and was used for early Starship testing. While it worked, it had many issues, including overheating and complex manufacturing. In 2022, SpaceX introduced the Raptor 2 engine as a major upgrade over the first version. The original Raptor 1 had a thrust of about 185 metric tons at sea level and 200 metric tons in a vacuum. However, it was not optimized for mass production, had high manufacturing costs, and suffered from combustion instability due to its extreme operating conditions. The Raptor 2 engine was designed to fix these problems, making it lighter, more powerful, and much easier to manufacture. The thrust was increased to 230 metric tons at sea level, a significant jump from its predecessor. The engine's weight was also reduced from 2 metric tons to 1.6 metric tons, improving its efficiency. SpaceX also simplified the design, removing unnecessary components and enhancing its cooling systems. The chamber pressure was raised to around 300 bar, making it one of the highest pressure rocket engines ever built. This higher pressure allowed for better efficiency and power output while reducing the chances of failure. Additionally, the Raptor 2 engine was significantly cheaper to produce, enabling SpaceX to manufacture more engines at a faster rate. In 2024, SpaceX unveiled the Raptor 3 engine, pushing the performance even further. The thrust was increased to 280 metric tons at sea level, marking another major leap in power. The chamber pressure was pushed beyond 350 bar, surpassing any other operational rocket engine in history. This extreme pressure allowed for an even more efficient burn, extracting the maximum possible energy from its methane and liquid oxygen fuel. The weight of the engine was reduced further to about 1.525 metric tons, improving its thrust-to-weight ratio. Unlike the previous versions, the Raptor 3 engine incorporated new materials and a redesigned combustion chamber, eliminating the need for external heat shielding and further reducing complexity. The goal was not only to increase power but also to make the engine more reusable and cost-effective. By removing unnecessary components and optimizing the cooling system, SpaceX was able to significantly lower production costs, aiming for a price of less than $250,000 per engine, which is dramatically lower than traditional rocket engines. Now, SpaceX is working on the Raptor 4 engine, which Musk has hinted will exceed 330 metric tons of thrust, making it one of the most powerful rocket engines ever built. While exact details have not been officially released, based on previous versions, it is expected that Raptor 4 will further optimize weight and improve efficiency. The thrust-to-weight ratio is projected to be even higher than the previous versions, likely exceeding 220 to 1. The chamber pressure could also be increased beyond 350 bar, possibly reaching 380 bar or more if SpaceX continues to push the limits of material science and cooling technology. To understand the significance of these improvements, comparing the Raptor 4 engine to one of the most famous rocket engines in history, the F1 engine used on the Saturn V rocket provides a clear perspective. The F1 engine, which powered the Apollo missions, produced a staggering 787 metric tons of thrust. However, it was an entirely different type of engine, running on refined kerosene and liquid oxygen. While it was immensely powerful, it was also significantly heavier, weighing 8.4 metric tons per engine. This resulted in a thrust-to-weight ratio of about 95 to 1, which is far lower than the Raptor 4 engine's expected performance. Additionally, the F1 engine operated at a much lower chamber pressure of just 70 bar, which limited its overall efficiency. The Raptor 4 engine, despite having less total thrust than the F1, is vastly more efficient in terms of thrust produced per unit of weight, allowing for better performance in reusable rockets. As SpaceX increases the power of its Raptor engines, integrating them into Starship becomes more difficult. More powerful engines generate higher thrust and extreme pressures, which create challenges like thermal stress, vibrations, and structural loads. Managing 33 high-thrust engines on the Super Heavy booster requires precise control and real-time adjustments to prevent failures. As engines get more powerful, handling them efficiently becomes more complex. To keep up with this, SpaceX is also planning to make Starship bigger, allowing it to carry more payload and handle more powerful engines. Currently, Starship is 121 meters tall, with the Super Heavy booster at 71 meters and Starship itself at 50 meters. It has a diameter of 9 meters and weighs about 5,000 metric tons at launch. In its reusable version, it can carry 150 metric tons of payload to low Earth orbit, while in an expendable configuration, it can carry 250 metric tons. The Super Heavy booster uses 33 Raptor engines to produce 7,590 metric tons of thrust. Musk has mentioned the possibility of a larger version of Starship, sometimes referred to as Starship 2.0, which would be about twice the size of the current Starship. That means a total height of around 240 meters and a diameter of 18 meters. A larger version like this would allow for a payload capacity of more than 500 metric tons to low Earth orbit. To power such a large vehicle, SpaceX would need even more powerful engines, potentially exceeding 350 to 400 metric tons of thrust per engine. If SpaceX continues to develop even larger versions, future Starships could be designed to carry thousands of metric tons of cargo and dozens of crew members on long-duration missions. However, scaling up Starship also comes with challenges. A larger vehicle would require new launch and landing infrastructure, stronger ground support equipment and transport systems to move the larger rocket components. SpaceX would likely need to build entirely new launch pads beyond what exists at Starbase in Texas and the planned site at Kennedy Space Center. Flight 8 was a major test for SpaceX's Starship program, but it encountered serious problems, engine failures being the most critical. Starship needs all its engines to work correctly throughout its journey, but during this flight, multiple engines failed, causing the spacecraft to lose control and ultimately end in destruction. To fully understand what went wrong, it's important to look at past flight tests. In Flight 7, a pressure buildup in the ship's attic compartment led to fuel leaks and engine malfunctions. SpaceX made design changes after that flight, but Flight 8 still suffered from engine failures, showing that more improvements were necessary. During Flight 8, SpaceX's livestream captured small fires near the Raptor vacuum engine. These fires seem to originate from the regenerative cooling pipes, which keep the engine at the right temperature. If these pipes are damaged, the engine can overheat and gradually lose efficiency. At first, the problem didn't seem too serious, but as the flight continued, things quickly got worse. One engine failed, leading to shutdowns in others. Eventually, Starship was left with only 2 working vacuum engines, which was not enough to keep it stable. The spacecraft lost control and was destroyed. Experts now believe the real issue isn't the Raptor engines themselves, but the fuel feed lines that supply them with liquid methane and liquid oxygen. These lines transport propellant from Starship's tanks to the engines, and if they have defects, such as leaks, blockages, or structural weaknesses, they can disrupt fuel flow, causing engine failures. One key discovery is that the problem seems to get worse when there is less liquid oxygen in the tanks. This could explain why the issue wasn't detected during ground tests, where tanks are full. It only became apparent during flight as oxygen levels dropped. Additionally, the latest version of Starship was modified to accommodate 3 vacuum engines instead of 2. This required extra transfer tubes and aft dome modifications. While these changes were made to improve performance, they may have also introduced new vulnerabilities, making the system more prone to fires. SpaceX has been improving Starship through multiple test flights, and engine problems have been a recurring issue. In Flight 1, the first integrated test of Starship and Super Heavy, several engines failed during ascent, and the vehicle lost control before being destroyed by the flight termination system. The cause was methane leaks and engine malfunctions that disrupted Starship's trajectory. After this test, SpaceX made several upgrades to the engines and launch pad systems. Flight 2 also suffered from multiple engine shutdowns, particularly in the Super Heavy booster. Starship failed to complete its planned orbital insertion due to issues with the hot staging system, which was being tested for the first time. The booster did not separate cleanly, affecting Starship's ascent and leading to a loss of control. Despite this setback, the data from Flight 2 helped SpaceX refine hot staging, which is critical for efficient orbital flight. Flight 3 was the first test where Starship reached near orbital velocity, marking significant progress. However, engine failures still played a role in limiting its success. Multiple Raptors shut down during ascent, and although the vehicle achieved re-entry, the heat shield suffered extensive damage, causing the ship to be lost before splashdown. This demonstrated that engine reliability and structural resilience were still key challenges. Flight 4 aimed to fix issues from previous tests, but engine shutdowns and fuel system problems were still evident. Starship managed to conduct a full-duration burn, but during the deorbit phase, multiple vacuum engine failures led to an unstable descent. At this point, SpaceX began to focus heavily on the feedline system, recognizing it as a major weak point. The Raptor engines are some of the most advanced rocket engines ever built, but they rely on a stable fuel supply to function properly. The feed lines must withstand extreme pressures and temperatures while ensuring a constant flow of liquid methane and oxygen. If these lines develop cracks, leaks, or pressure fluctuations, engine performance is directly affected. In Flight 8, the increasing severity of the issue as oxygen levels dropped suggests that the feed line system isn't optimized for low fuel conditions. Another challenge SpaceX faces is making Starship as lightweight as possible while keeping its structure strong. The company has been designing thinner, more efficient feed lines to maximize fuel capacity, but if they are too fragile, they can become prone to failure. To fix these problems, SpaceX is now running additional fuel system tests at different propellant levels to see how the feed lines behave under low fuel conditions. These tests will help engineers find weak spots and reinforce them before Flight 9. SpaceX is already working on solutions to these challenges. The company has started hiring more engineers to focus specifically on Raptor engine feed lines. Their job will be to redesign and strengthen the system that delivers fuel to the engines, ensuring that it functions reliably in all phases of flight. In addition to improving the feed lines, SpaceX is making changes to Starship's aft dome and transfer tubes. These modifications aim to prevent leaks and reduce the risk of fire spread in case of an anomaly. Flight 9 will incorporate all the latest fixes and improvements from previous flights, including upgraded fuel feed lines to prevent leaks and pressure losses, a stronger aft dome, and transfer tubes to reduce fire risk, reinforced vacuum engine cooling pipes to prevent overheating, and more extensive low-fuel testing before launch. If SpaceX succeeds, it will be a major step toward making Starship a fully reusable launch system capable of handling future deep space missions. Meanwhile, 2 NASA astronauts are stuck on the International Space Station due to problems with Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. The mission, which launched on June 5, 2024, was supposed to last only 8 days, but technical issues have delayed their return for over a month. NASA and Boeing are still trying to determine if Starliner can safely bring them back, and there are discussions about using a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft as a backup plan. The problems started after Starliner docked at the International Space Station. Engineers found helium leaks and thruster malfunctions, raising concerns about whether the spacecraft could safely undock and complete its return to Earth. Boeing has conducted multiple tests, including firing the thrusters in space, but there is still uncertainty about their reliability during re-entry. NASA has emphasized that the astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, are safe and are continuing their work on the International Space Station. However, with Starliner still being evaluated, NASA is considering alternatives in case the spacecraft cannot return on its own. One option is to bring them back on SpaceX's Crew Dragon, which has successfully transported astronauts to and from the International Space Station multiple times. A possible rescue could happen during SpaceX's Crew 9 mission, scheduled to launch in mid-August. NASA is reviewing whether extra seats could be added to Crew Dragon or if a separate mission would be needed. However, they are still hoping Starliner can be fixed and complete its mission as planned. Starliner program has been a complete failure, and after the latest mission problems, the company seems to finally understand that it's time to move on. Reports suggest that Boeing is looking to exit the Starliner program after losing billions of dollars trying to compete with SpaceX. The Starliner program has struggled from the start. Initially, Boeing signed a $4.2 billion contract with NASA in 2014 to develop the spacecraft as part of the Commercial Crew program. In comparison, SpaceX received $2.6 billion for Crew Dragon, yet SpaceX successfully launched astronauts years ahead of Boeing. Repeated failures have forced Boeing to invest even more of its own money to fix Starliner, and according to recent reports, the company has now lost over $1.5 billion on the project. This latest mission was supposed to be a turning point, a chance for Boeing to prove Starliner was reliable. Becoming an astronaut is one of the most dreamed-about jobs in the world. Millions of people grow up imagining what it would be like to fly into space, float in zero gravity, and see Earth from above. It sounds fun, exciting, and adventurous. Just the idea of leaving the planet feels unreal. But like every other job, being an astronaut also comes with serious downsides. In fact, it's probably one of the most dangerous professions out there. And the recent Boeing Starliner mission is a perfect example of how quickly things can go wrong. As many of you know, the astronauts from that mission were safely brought back to Earth, thanks to SpaceX's Crew Dragon. At first, it seemed like everything ended well. Everyone was relieved. But now, after returning home, the astronauts have started sharing what really happened during that mission. And the truth is shocking. What they revealed makes one thing clear: Starliner isn't ready, and this program might need to be shut down for good. Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams were supposed to return to Earth just 8 days after launching in June 2024. Instead, they ended up spending 286 days in orbit due to major issues with their spacecraft. In their first interview since returning to Earth, they opened up about how serious the situation really was. The trouble started as they approached the space station. Wilmore had to take manual control of the capsule, and almost immediately 4 of the spacecraft's thrusters failed. Without those thrusters, they couldn't steer. Even though they were just a short distance from the International Space Station, flight rules normally require a return to Earth if the spacecraft loses key functions. But Wilmore wasn't sure they could even do that. He told the media, "I don't know that we can come back to Earth at that point. I'm thinking we probably can't." He had to decide whether it was safer to attempt re-entry or try docking with the International Space Station in a crippled spacecraft. Williams added that inside the capsule, the two of them were sharing a lot of unspoken communication, unsure of what was causing the thrusters to fail or what could go wrong next. Wilmore explained that with the loss of control, he was trying to work out orbital mechanics in his head. Their spacecraft had fallen slightly below the station, meaning they were moving faster. If things kept going wrong, they would drift further away. If another thruster failed or if they lost contact with ground control, the situation could spiral fast. The capsule's navigation relied on visual tracking of the International Space Station, and the system was starting to lose alignment. Wilmore said the spacecraft was beginning to drift, and they both knew that if the system thought things were too far off, it would automatically abort the docking. Eventually, Wilmore had to give up manual control, floating in space and hoping for a fix. NASA's ground team managed to reboot the thrusters. Williams said she was extremely relieved when they finally docked. "I did this little happy dance," she said. But even though they made it, Wilmore immediately had doubts about their return. He said he knew right away that they might not come home in Starliner. One of his first calls was to the International Space Station flight director, asking whether the capsule was still considered a safe haven. As it turned out, it wasn't. And that's when this mission, originally planned for 8 days, became a 9-month stay in orbit. They remained on the space station while NASA and Boeing tried to figure out what went wrong. Since Boeing's Starliner was not safe to bring them back, NASA had to find another option. They turned to SpaceX. The Crew 9 mission was adjusted to make room for the 2 astronauts on the return trip. On March 17, 2025, the Crew 10 Dragon spacecraft arrived at the International Space Station with 4 new astronauts to take their place. The next day, Williams and Wilmore boarded the SpaceX capsule and safely returned to Earth, landing off the coast of Florida. Spending that much time in space comes with physical and mental challenges. Muscle loss, bone weakening, and radiation exposure are common problems in microgravity. On top of the stress and health risks, many were shocked by how little astronauts get paid for a mission like this. Both Wilmore and Williams are in the highest federal pay grade, earning between $125,000 and $162,000 per year. That means they made somewhere between $94,000 and $123,000 for their 9-month mission. But that's just their fixed salary. For time spent in space or on travel status, astronauts also receive a per diem allowance, which is meant to cover food and incidental expenses. According to the U.S. Department of State's foreign per diem rates and NASA's internal policies, astronauts are generally given a daily space allowance of about $5 while on board the International Space Station. This amount hasn't been updated in years and is nowhere near what you might expect for such an extreme environment. Over the course of their 286-day stay, that works out to just $1,430 in total. This led to public criticism once the details went viral. Even former U.S. President Donald Trump expressed shock at the low compensation during a media appearance, saying, "If I have to, I'll pay it out of my own pocket," and thanked Musk for stepping in with SpaceX. The worst part about the recent failed Starliner launch is that this isn't the first time something like this has happened. In fact, problems have followed Boeing spacecraft since the very beginning. The first uncrewed test flight, called Orbital Flight Test 1, launched in December 2019. It was supposed to demonstrate that Starliner could safely fly to the International Space Station, dock, and return to Earth. Basically the same mission profile that SpaceX's Crew Dragon had already completed earlier that year. But Starliner never even made it to the space station. Just after launch, the spacecraft suffered a major software error involving its mission elapsed timer. The system was off by 11 hours, which caused Starliner to misfire its thrusters and burn fuel incorrectly. By the time the error was detected, there wasn't enough propellant left to safely reach the International Space Station. NASA had to cut the mission short and bring the capsule back to Earth after just 2 days. A post-flight investigation uncovered over 80 issues, including another critical software bug that could have caused the service module and crew module to collide during separation, something that could have been catastrophic in a crewed flight. This led to serious questions about Boeing's software testing and quality assurance processes. NASA required Boeing to run a second uncrewed mission to prove Starliner was ready for human spaceflight. That flight was supposed to happen in 2021, but just hours before launch, engineers discovered that 13 out of 24 oxidizer valves in the spacecraft's propulsion system were stuck. Investigations revealed that moisture had entered the valve housings and caused nitric acid corrosion, locking the valves in place. This issue forced Boeing to roll the rocket back to the hangar and postpone the mission for nearly a year. The spacecraft had to be removed from the launch vehicle and heavily inspected. Boeing implemented several fixes, including adding heaters and desiccant systems to reduce moisture, but the root of the problem couldn't be fully confirmed. Why? Because the Starliner service module burns up during re-entry, meaning engineers can't physically inspect key components after flight. Second orbital flight finally launched in May 2022, nearly 2.5 years after Flight 1. This time, Starliner did successfully reach and dock with the International Space Station. However, even that flight wasn't flawless. Engineers encountered anomalies with the spacecraft's cooling system and propulsion during the mission. Despite all this, NASA gave Boeing the green light to proceed with a crewed test flight, which was originally scheduled for 2023 but ended up delayed multiple times due to continued technical concerns. When Wilmore and Williams finally launched in June 2024, it was after years of development problems, repeated delays, and lingering technical doubts. For those of you who've been following the development of Starship closely, you already know how Flight 7 and 8 were a huge letdown. When Flight 7 ended in a terrible explosion, many of us hoped SpaceX would identify the cause and come back stronger in the next mission. But instead, Flight 8 introduced even more problems and left the community questioning the progress that once seemed unstoppable. And yet, as always, we keep hoping. Recently, SpaceX revealed that they've addressed every major issue that led to the failures of the last 2 flights. And now, They're gearing up for Flight 9. But the question is this just another overconfident promise that will end in disaster, or has SpaceX truly fixed the problems for good? Flight 9 of SpaceX's Starship program is almost here, and it could launch as soon as mid-April. Musk recently estimated a 4 to 6 week window after Flight 8, and the FCC has already approved a license for liftoff between April 7th and October 7th. Preparations are now in full swing at Starbase, and every system is being tested, upgraded, and refined to make sure this next flight doesn't just fly, it succeeds. Ship 25 and Booster 9 were a distant memory. Now we're looking at Ship 35 and Booster 16, the next vehicles in line to attempt what could be the most important Starship test yet. Both vehicles have already completed cryogenic proof tests. Booster 16 recently returned from testing and is undergoing final preparations for engine installation and static fire testing. Ship 35 is on a similar timeline. After engine installation, it will go through its own static fire campaign. The final phase will be the wet dress rehearsal, where fueling and countdown procedures are simulated in full. If all systems perform as expected, Flight 9 will be ready. When SpaceX launched the first fully integrated Starship on April 20, 2023, it was clear the goal wasn't success, it was data. That flight only lasted 4 minutes, and the vehicle lost control before stage separation. But the amount learned from that short test led to major upgrades. When Flight 2 launched in November 2023, the improvement was massive. Stage separation worked flawlessly for the first time using the new hot staging ring. The booster completed a flip maneuver, and the upper stage reached space and ignited its engines for a second burn. That was a big leap forward. Then came Flights 3 through 6, and each one pushed the boundaries even more. By the time Flight 6 launched, we saw what many considered Starship's peak performance so far. For the first time, the booster successfully landed on the launch tower's catch arms, Mechazilla, and the upper stage made a controlled re-entry and landed in the targeted ocean zone. It was the cleanest flight profile yet. The aerospace community started believing that full reusability was not just a dream, but a matter of time. This created a wave of excitement around the upcoming Flights 7 and 8. With so much momentum behind Flight 6, it seemed almost guaranteed that the next 2 missions would reach even greater levels of success. But that's not what happened. Instead of progress, the Starship program hit a surprising wall. Flight 7 revealed new problems. Shortly after separation, the upper stage encountered engine failures, and the mission ended early. Still, it was dismissed by many as a one-off issue. But when Flight 8 experienced nearly identical problems, it was clear something deeper was wrong. Both Flights 7 and 8 suffered upper stage failures caused by fires in the engine section. Analysis suggested that the problems stemmed from harmonic resonance, dangerous vibrations inside the cavity above the engine firewall. These vibrations likely caused structural leaks, which allowed propellant to escape and come into contact with engine exhaust, leading to fire and eventual engine failure. In both cases, the flight had to be terminated early. This was a step backward. After all the progress made through the first 6 flights, it was hard to believe that Starship was once again losing stages to engine problems. It raised questions about whether the newer V2 vehicle design had unintentionally introduced new weaknesses. In addition to the resonance issues, there were complications with hot staging itself. The ring that enables the upper stage to ignite before detaching was putting unexpected back pressure and shock on the upper stage, possibly contributing to the failures. Even the booster separation clamps showed signs of potential failure. On Flight 8, the countdown was delayed due to clamp-related issues. It was clear that SpaceX had to pause and address these problems before moving forward, and that's exactly what they've been doing since the last flight. To prevent the resonance problem, SpaceX is making refinements to the venting system to allow excess pressure to escape faster and more effectively. They've upgraded the nitrogen purge system to act faster in case of leaks, flushing out any propellant that could potentially mix with exhaust gases. On top of that, the engine cooling system is getting more protection to ensure overheating doesn't become an issue again during flight. There's also a strong focus on refining the feedline system. One theory suggests that as the vehicle burns more fuel and the tank levels drop, pressure and flow inconsistencies in the feed lines start to appear, something not detected during pre-flight tests, which often run with full tanks. For Flight 9, SpaceX is expected to run static fire tests with varying fuel levels to catch any hidden issues before launch. The structural resonance problem is also being addressed at the core level. SpaceX has hired new engineers specifically to study and fix harmonic vibration behavior in Starship's internal structure. This shows how seriously they're taking the issue. Meanwhile, Booster 16 is getting upgrades too. Improvements to the hot staging ring aim to reduce the amount of back pressure exerted on the upper stage. The separation clamps are undergoing rigorous inspection to ensure they function perfectly during stage separation. Even the booster engines are being adjusted to reduce stress during reignition, a phase that will be critical once SpaceX starts landing these boosters routinely. Both vehicles, S-35 and B-16, will also go through more thorough wet dress rehearsals. During the previous campaign, SpaceX skipped some of the WDR steps. This time the full sequence is expected to be carried out, testing fueling, pressurization, and countdown systems under flight-like conditions. Meanwhile, SpaceX is also making headlines with another big mission. Two NASA astronauts, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore, were stuck on the International Space Station for over 9 months. They originally went up on Boeing's Starliner spacecraft in June 2024 for what was supposed to be just an 8-day mission. But Starliner ran into problems after docking, like helium leaks and issues with its thrusters, so it couldn't bring them back. NASA turned to SpaceX for help. On March 14, 2025, SpaceX launched its Crew Dragon capsule as part of the Crew 10 mission. After a few days, Williams and Wilmore boarded the Dragon and left the International Space Station on March 17th. They safely splashed down off the coast of Florida on March 18th, ending their long and unexpected stay in space. This mission once again shows how reliable SpaceX's Dragon capsule is, especially compared to the still-troubled Starliner. SpaceX has been developing Starship for a decade now, conducting dozens of test flights to refine its design. Almost every test reveals something that needs improvement, leading SpaceX to fix one problem while often uncovering another. This process of rapid iteration is how SpaceX pushes forward. When compared to other rockets, like Blue Origin's New Glenn, the difference in testing frequency and encountered issues becomes clear. New Glenn hasn't had as many launches, nor has it faced as many challenges. The reason for this lies in the fundamental differences between these two rockets. New Glenn is not a groundbreaking concept. It follows the traditional rocket design approach. Its size is comparable to previous rockets, and while it's large, its complexity is nowhere near that of Starship. Blue Origin had many existing designs to reference when developing New Glenn. Starship, on the other hand, is in a league of its own. It is the largest rocket ever built and is designed to be fully reusable. Unlike conventional rockets where only the booster or part of the system might be recovered, Starship aims to reuse both the booster and the upper stage multiple times, significantly reducing launch costs. Standing at 121 meters tall with a 9-meter diameter, Starship is a massive vehicle capable of carrying up to 150 tons to low Earth orbit when fully refueled in space. It is powered by Raptor engines, which use liquid methane and liquid oxygen, methalox, instead of the more commonly used kerosene-based fuels. This makes it well suited for long-term space missions, including trips to the Moon and Mars. The Super Heavy booster, which provides the initial thrust, is equipped with 33 Raptor engines, while the upper stage, Starship itself, carries 6 Raptors, 3 optimized for sea-level operations and 3 Raptor vacuum engines designed for space. As we have all witnessed, the latest test flight of this gigantic rocket ended in an explosion. SpaceX has been working hard to analyze the failure, fix the problems, and improve the vehicle's design. Now they have finally addressed all major issues, and preparations are already underway for another launch. During Flight 8, problems began when an orange glow was observed on one of the Raptor vacuum engines. This glow was likely caused by overheating or a failure in the cooling system. The cooling system is essential for managing the high temperatures generated during combustion. It circulates cryogenic fuel, such as liquid methane or liquid oxygen, through the nozzle and engine walls. If this system fails due to a leak, blockage, or structural damage, the engine can overheat, lose thrust, and ultimately stop working. At T+8 minutes, one Raptor vacuum engine shut down unexpectedly. Shortly after, all three center-mounted sea-level Raptor engines also shut down. This created an imbalance in thrust, causing the vehicle to go off course. Within seconds, the ship lost control, and telemetry was lost at T+9 minutes 30 seconds. Video from the launch showed an explosion near the engines, supporting the idea that a sudden failure occurred. The failure pattern in Flight 8 was different from previous flights. In Flight 7, a propellant leak in the ship's attic space caused fires that shut down multiple engines before the vehicle exploded. In contrast, Flight 8's failure was much more abrupt, suggesting that the issue may have come from inside an Raptor vacuum engine instead of from leaks elsewhere. The Raptor vacuum engine has a cooling system that helps prevent overheating. If a leak or rupture occurred, possibly due to manufacturing defects, material fatigue, or vibrations, the engine could have overheated and been damaged. The orange glow seen during the flight suggests that this might have happened. If leaked propellant ignited, it could have caused an explosion, damaging nearby engines and systems, leading to a chain reaction of failures. Another possible explanation is that vibrations in the ship's new Block 2 fuel lines may have worsened the problem. The updated fuel system in Starship uses vacuum-insulated pipes, a design intended to improve efficiency by reducing heat transfer and preventing propellant boil-off. However, this new system may have introduced unforeseen issues related to structural vibrations and fluid dynamics. In Flight 7, the propellant tanks were still mostly full at the time of failure, which helped dampen vibrations and prevented excessive structural stress. In contrast, Flight 8's failure occurred when the tanks were at a lower fill level, meaning there was less mass to counteract oscillations. As a result, the ship likely experienced increased fuel line movement and resonance, which may have damaged a critical component, such as a Raptor vacuum cooling line. A similar challenge was encountered in the development of the Space Shuttle's external fuel tank and main engines. The Space Shuttle used liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen as propellants, and engineers had to carefully design the plumbing and tank structure to handle vibrations and prevent dangerous sloshing or resonance effects. Unlike Starship, the shuttle's fuel tank was single-use, but it still had to survive the intense stresses of launch. Engineers implemented baffles and damping systems to minimize oscillations, and extensive ground testing was done to ensure the system's stability under different fuel levels. Despite these efforts, some early flights still experienced pogo oscillations, vibrations caused by the interaction between fuel flow and engine performance. These oscillations, if not controlled, could lead to structural failures or engine shutdowns, similar to what happened with Starship Flight 8. Starship's problem is likely more complex because it is much larger than the shuttle and relies on a methane-based fuel system. Methane has different flow properties compared to hydrogen or kerosene, which means its behavior inside the plumbing system, especially under rapid acceleration, could introduce new vibration-related challenges. The new vacuum-insulated fuel lines in Block 2 may not have been fully optimized for the dynamic conditions of flight, especially in lower fuel states. SpaceX is already working on solutions. The company is likely making changes to the fuel system to reduce vibrations and prevent fuel cavitation. They may also adjust thrust settings to avoid problem areas in the engine's performance. Other potential fixes include adding fire suppression, improving venting to release pressure, and strengthening parts of the engine to handle stress better. The Raptor vacuum engine is important because it is designed specifically for vacuum conditions. Unlike the sea-level Raptor, which is optimized for atmospheric conditions, the Raptor vacuum features a larger nozzle designed for maximum efficiency in the vacuum of space. This design allows it to generate more thrust while consuming less fuel. The Raptor vacuum achieves a specific impulse of about 378 seconds in vacuum, compared to the sea-level Raptor's 330 seconds at sea level. This efficiency is essential for Starship's overall performance, as it determines how much payload the vehicle can carry and how much fuel is required for missions beyond Earth. Starship's upper stage is powered by 6 Raptor engines, 3 sea-level Raptors, and 3 Raptor vacuum engines. The sea-level Raptors provide thrust vector control during launch and landing, while the Raptor vacuums handle the majority of propulsion in space. These engines are crucial for reaching orbit and executing necessary maneuvers for missions to the Moon, Mars, and beyond. SpaceX is now gearing up for Starship Flight 9, which is expected to take place sometime in mid-2024, pending regulatory approvals from the Federal Aviation Administration. The prototypes involved in this mission are Ship 29 for the upper stage and Booster 11 for the Super Heavy first stage. The upcoming test flight will likely feature further improvements based on the failures of Flight 8. SpaceX has been working on refining the fuel feed system, engine reliability, and thermal protection systems to enhance Starship's overall performance. Additionally, SpaceX aims to increase the success rate of hot staging, where the upper stage ignites its engines while still attached to the booster, improving efficiency in stage separation. Flight 9 is expected to follow a similar trajectory to previous test flights, with an attempt to reach orbit and perform a controlled re-entry. However, SpaceX might adjust mission objectives depending on the latest data analysis. More details about the flight schedule and technical updates are expected in the coming weeks as SpaceX moves closer to launch. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. SpaceX has been working on projects that were once considered impossible. One of the most important breakthroughs was making rockets reusable. Before SpaceX came along, rockets were designed for single use only. Once launched, the boosters would either burn up in the atmosphere or crash into the ocean, making spaceflight extremely expensive and unsustainable. This changed when SpaceX developed the Falcon 9, the first orbital-class rocket capable of landing and flying again. This drastically reduced launch costs and made regular space missions more feasible. Today, many space companies around the world are following the same model, working on reusable launch systems because of SpaceX's success. In addition to Falcon 9, SpaceX also developed Falcon Heavy, which is currently the most powerful operational rocket in the world by thrust. It can lift up to 63 metric tons to low Earth orbit, more than twice the payload of the next closest rocket. Falcon Heavy has been used for missions involving large payloads, interplanetary probes, and national security satellites. But even with these major achievements, none of SpaceX's previous projects compare in difficulty to what they are trying to do with Starship. Starship is designed to be a fully reusable spacecraft system for long-duration missions to the Moon, Mars, and eventually deep space. It consists of 2 stages, the upper stage called Starship and the first stage called Super Heavy. The full system stands about 120 meters tall, making it the largest and most powerful rocket ever built. Developing Starship has been much harder than Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy for several reasons. First, the scale of Starship is massive. It is designed to carry over 100 metric tons of cargo to low Earth orbit, far more than Falcon Heavy. That requires an enormous amount of thrust, which comes from 33 Raptor engines on the Super Heavy booster and 6 more on the upper Starship stage. We can clearly see just how difficult developing Starship has been by looking at the results of its recent test flights. For comparison, Blue Origin has also been working on its heavy-lift rocket New Glenn, around the same time SpaceX began developing Starship. However, while New Glenn faced delays too, it finally launched its first orbital mission with almost no issues, even successfully deploying payloads on the very first try. Meanwhile, Starship has launched 8 times, and every single launch has encountered some form of problem. From launch pad destruction during the first flight, to engine failures, heat shield damage, and stage separation issues, each test has exposed new challenges. The first test flight in April 2023, destroyed the concrete base of the launch pad at Starbase due to the intense blast from the 33 Raptor engines. This caused flying debris, damage to ground systems, and triggered a long FAA investigation. Later flights improved on that with a steel flame trench and water deluge system, but other problems kept appearing. Some launches saw Raptors shutting down mid-flight. Others showed tiles from the heat shield falling off or getting burned, putting reusability into question. Even after SpaceX successfully demonstrated stage separation and higher altitude maneuvers, new problems emerged, like structural leaks in the upper stage, damage in the engine section, and unexpected fires. More recently, SpaceX identified a new concern, this time with a critical system known as the hot staging process. Hot staging is a technique in rocket design where the upper stage engines are ignited before the lower stage is fully separated. This allows for continuous thrust between stages, avoiding any gap in acceleration. SpaceX adopted this method to improve Starship's performance, and according to Musk, hot staging allows Starship to carry around 10% more payload to low Earth orbit compared to traditional stage separation methods. The system uses a specially built interstage ring with vents placed between the Super Heavy booster and the Starship upper stage. When the upper stage engines ignite, the ring channels the exhaust gases through the vents so they don't build up dangerously between the two stages. It's a design borrowed from Russian rockets like Soyuz, where it has been used reliably for decades. On paper, it was the perfect solution to improve performance while maintaining smooth separation. And in initial test flights, it worked, at least in terms of separating the stages. From the second flight onward, Starship successfully completed stage separation using hot staging. But while separation was happening as planned, new problems began to appear elsewhere, specifically in the upper stage's engine section. SpaceX engineers noticed unexpected damage in the attic compartment just above the Raptors. In one flight, a leak caused by high-frequency vibrations led to pressure damage and engine issues. In another flight, a small fire broke out near the vacuum engine, raising questions about whether hot staging might be stressing the ship more than anticipated. It turns out that during hot staging, not all exhaust escapes cleanly through the vents. Some of it reflects back upward, creating what's called back pressure or back shock. This sudden return of heat and force can damage sensitive parts of the engine bay, especially the vacuum-optimized Raptor engines, which aren't designed to handle that kind of thermal load. Interestingly, these kinds of problems were not happening in earlier versions of Starship like Ship V1. That version had reinforced shielding around the engine section. But newer versions like Ship V2 and V3 were made lighter to improve performance, and that meant reducing some of the protective structures. As a result, the newer ships are more vulnerable to back pressure and heat buildup during hot staging. Another factor making this more difficult to analyze is the difference between ground testing and real flights. During static fire tests, when Starship engines are fired on the ground, hot staging doesn't happen. The engines are tested without any interaction with the booster or interstage. So those tests don't reveal the same thermal and pressure conditions experienced during actual separation. That means hot staging effects can only really be observed during flight, after the rocket is already in the air. It's a high-risk way to test, but that's part of SpaceX's rapid development approach. Besides the thermal issues, the hot staging ring itself presents other challenges. It's heavy, adding mass to the vehicle. It has small vent holes, which limit how well it can dissipate heat and pressure. And it even affects the Super Heavy booster's grid fins. Some of the heat from separation travels down and partially melts the fins, which could lead to more refurbishment and maintenance. That goes against SpaceX's long-term goal of rapid reusability with minimal downtime. To fix these issues, SpaceX is making changes. They're designing a new hot staging ring that's longer, lighter, and has bigger vent holes. This should help reduce back pressure and overheating. They're also planning to reposition the booster's grid fins lower to protect them from the heat of separation. These changes aren't implemented yet. The next flight, using Booster 16, will still use the older hot staging ring. But newer vehicles like Booster 18 and Ship 37 may debut the improved design as early as Flight 11, possibly in June. If not, we'll likely see the new hot staging system on Flight 12 or 13 later in the year. Now, SpaceX is getting ready for Starship's 9th test flight. For this mission, they'll be using Ship 35 as the upper stage and Booster 16 as the first stage. Ship 35 completed stacking at the end of January 2025 and finished cryogenic testing in mid-March. Booster 16 also passed cryogenic testing at the end of February and was moved back to the production area for final preparations. The flight is expected to happen sometime in April 2025, but the exact date will depend on how the remaining tests go and when the FAA gives approval.